Welcome back. Thank you for staying with the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. The cries of the people from the Tomazo community over their long-standing lack of water have been heard, and it is being addressed by the powers that be at WASCO. Gordon Wyke, who is head of the project management unit of WASCO, spoke on an ongoing Dennery project which has been underway for approximately a year and is due for completion at the end of January. He said as the project is set to go on stream, the company has experienced some interactions trying to tie in the new system with the old. He said whilst this caused some issues to arise, the main cause of the Tomazo water woes is due to operational problems.
When we have some very heavy rainfall, we have had some issues at the intake, and this has caused actually some problems with the supply to the treatment plant, and as a consequence, we've had to stop the supply to the treatment plant into the distribution system. So that has been part of the problem actually over the last few months, not so much the project itself, where the interactions we've had, we've managed to finish those things, and now it's just a matter of putting the water on stream.
WASCO says active steps are being taken to solve the problem.
And we are trying to increase efforts, essentially, to ensure that the intake is not unduly affected by heavy rainfalls. So that means basically a more frequent clearing of any clogs or sedimentation that's there, the extra sedimentation that's there, basically ensuring that we clean it at a more frequent rate so that the intake is clear to provide the water to the water treatment plant.
White said whilst operations were slowed down during the Christmas season, WASCO workers are back on track. He assured that said operational problems are being addressed on an immediate basis to allow the water supply to be more frequent. He said on the other hand, once the project is completed, that too will ensure a more even supply of water to the troubled communities. Australia battles bushfires every year, but little has compared to the widespread devastation of the 2019-2020 fire season. Millions of acres have been torched and entire homes swallowed by the spreading flames. With more than 20 people and about 500 million animals killed, local officials say Australia is in a battle to calm the flames.
Record-breaking temperatures and months of severe drought have fueled a series of massive bushfires across Australia since September. Upwards of 14.1 million hectares of bush, forests and parks have been burnt. In the worst-hit state, New South Wales, fire has affected almost 5 million hectares, destroying more than 1,300 homes and forcing thousands to seek shelter elsewhere. With more than 130 fires burning across the state today and 54 still not contained by firefighters, environmental sciences professor at the University of Sydney, Christopher Dickman, warns of possible widespread extinctions following the death of 480 million animals and extensive habitat destruction.
I think there's no doubt that some of the already threatened species with small populations and small distributions will be subject to extinction as a direct consequence of the fires. These include some small marsupials, some small bush birds, even some frog species. The southern corroboree frog is a good example in the Australian high country. There will be the likelihood of further extinctions down the track if we see a continuation of these events in the future, as populations of even common things at the moment begin to diminish in population size with repeated fires.
Meanwhile, away from the flames, millions of Australians are choking on smoke as air quality drops to unhealthy levels. A thick blanket of smoke has covered the nation's capital, spanning all the way to neighbouring territory, New Zealand. Induced air quality levels of over 200 units per cubic meter, more than 6 times safe levels. Conditions have been exacerbated by 40 degrees Celsius temperatures and strong winds, making it difficult for the thousands of firefighters deployed in the field. Several international agencies have begun donation drives in anticipation of relief efforts and are asking the global public to keep the people of Australia in their hearts and in their prayers. Hot 7 News, I am Jacqueline.
Now, environmentalist Dr. James Fletcher is raising awareness of the underlying yet serious effects of the ongoing fire that has been obliterating the continent of Australia. Dr. Fletcher says not only is this country's biodiversity in grave danger, but the CO2 emissions coming from the fire stands to wreak havoc on the world's oxygen supplies, as well as the health of billions who suffer from respiratory problems. He says he hopes the catastrophe is a learning curve. Rochelle Gonzalez reports.
Whilst the world continues to watch in horror as the continent of Australia is consumed by an ongoing inferno, one local environmentalist is shining a spotlight on further deadly issues caused by the fire. To date, over 11 million acres of land has been reduced to ash and nearly 500 million animals have been killed. Dr. James Fletcher said the damage caused by the fire is unspeakable and unimaginable. He said the fire reveals a bitter truth about climate change.
It drives home the fact that climate change is not just a phenomenon that's affecting small island developing states. I think many of the bigger countries, the developed countries, were not paying sufficient attention to this climate crisis, probably because they didn't feel that it was hitting home, that yes, it was something that the small islands were talking about, but yeah, they always have hurricanes and these things to contend with, and what's the big deal? But now that it's affecting them, not this year, but last year, we heard about the floods in Venice. This climate crisis is affecting not just small island states, but it's affecting the developed countries, and the developed countries are the ones, unfortunately, that not only cause the problem, but are least responsive to the problem.
Dr. Fletcher said whilst the world mourns the immediate tragedy, there are more problems afoot, and they too are just as deadly and worrying.
There's a double whammy. There's the whammy of the impact on the environment, the impact on biodiversity. Over almost 500 million animals, as you've said, have been killed already. But there's also the impact of the CO2 emissions that are now going into the atmosphere and are using up that very limited carbon budget that we have still available to us to keep temperatures down, to keep the average global temperature increase to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. We're using a lot of that carbon budget up right now. The other thing that's happening is that there's a very serious impact on human health because, with these forest fires, you have more particulate matter being put into the atmosphere. So people who have respiratory problems, people who are asthmatic, that is not a good place to be in.
The environmentalist said he hopes this is a learning experience for the Australian government, as ironically, they are not the most cooperative environmentalists.
Australia has been extremely problematic in climate change negotiations. They have not been helpful at all. They've tried all sorts of means to bring in place creative accounting so that they don't meet their obligations. They have not been very ambitious with their targets under the Paris Agreement. So they have not been one of the countries that has been forthcoming and helpful during climate change negotiations. And the government right now in Australia is not a pro-climate change government at all. So it's quite ironic that they are really experiencing these effects. So maybe, if anything good comes out of this, it's a better appreciation by the administration in Australia and in many of the other developed countries that are posing problems for us.
Dr. Fletcher said he does not see how the nation can recover from such a tragedy. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I'm Rochelle Gonzalez.
The month of January is dedicated to creating awareness of cervical cancer. Faces of Cancer, as part of its awareness campaign, has sought to debunk some myths associated with the illness. One representative of the organization spoke with Hot 7 News and says all sexually active women and men should be tested for HPV, the infection that leads to cervical cancer in women.
As the world celebrates Cervical Cancer Awareness Month, Faces of Cancer St. Lucia has sought to elaborate the importance of prevention and early detection of the infectious disease. Cervical cancer was once the leading cause of death for women in the United States, according to the National Foundation for Infectious Diseases. Secretary at Faces of Cancer St. Lucia, Paula Alfred, says thanks to early detection screening and human papillomavirus HPV vaccinations, the chance for preventing the spread of the female cancer can be brought down.
What we know about cervical cancer, it is basically spread through sex. So it's caused by the HPV virus. Now, if that HPV virus is not caught early enough, then it develops into the cervical cancer, and that's one of the cancers we know that could actually be prevented, through safe sex. That's why now they're bringing that HPV virus vaccine. So they could give it too early before your first sexual contact, because actually if you have had sex and developed that virus before the HPV, it becomes of no use. So that's why we're trying to bring, from Faces of Cancer St. Lucia, we're trying to bring in early detection to let people know, maybe abstinence, less partners, not that maybe, because you may even get it from a partner, you don't even know, because it may be in the system for maybe a good few years before even you realize that you have that HPV virus.
Alfred says there are signs that women should look out for in the early stages that can prompt them to go in for screening.
Maybe you'd expect a discharge. First of all, you might see an unusual discharge. So that would be a symptom, maybe some lower abdominal pain. Sometimes maybe a back pain, you feel something maybe going down in that area down there. You just need to check it out, because different people have different symptoms actually. So sometimes you may not have a pain, you may not even have an early discharge, but the only safe way is to do, you're sexually active, have your pap smears, and ask for the HPV virus when you do those pap smears.
Meanwhile, debate has centered on the issuing of vaccination to young students. Some parents remain opposed to the vaccination. However, the Department of Health and Wellness has approved the administration of the HPV vaccine to girls and boys ages 11 and 12 years. Alfred says the decision should remain with the parent.
It depends on the person. If you know that your child would not be sexually active, then you wouldn't go for it, because at that age, maybe some people might want to think maybe giving them the virus might give them a leeway to be sexually active, so you have that relationship with your child, your child, so you talk to your child and hoping they would go, with your advice. So it all depends, to each his own. If you feel you want to do it with your child, if on the other hand, if you feel, okay, my child will not be sexually active, all well and good.
Faces of Cancer continues to educate the general public through health fairs and educational drives to inform the public about all the truths about cervical cancer. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Solange Alfred.
Thank you, Solange. Barbados's former Prime Minister, Professor Owen Arthur, will be the new chairman of cash-strapped regional airline Liat. The veteran economist and former politician sees the new job as his biggest challenge yet. When contacted, Arthur confirmed his name had been put up by member governments to head the airline, and he said he would be briefed on his appointment soon. He said, quote, "The board will meet this week and it should be ratified then. There is a process in which a board ratifies its chairman, and that's where we are at this time. I believe in collective responsibility, so I will speak in detail later about my plans," end quote. Arthur replaces Dr. Joe Holder, also from Barbados, who resigned late last year. Maduro's administration continues its strong arm in Venezuela. On Sunday, the 5th of January, self-declared president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido, was violently blocked out of the National Assembly and subsequently ousted as head of Congress. Veteran journalist Earl Bousquet says members of the Lima group that support Guaido will have to go back to the drawing board as the anti-Maduro campaign loses major traction.
Venezuela's politics descended into chaos on Sunday, 5th January, as a blockade by National Guards with riot shields kept self-declared Venezuelan President Juan Guaido from entering into parliament. Media coverage of the disarray shows Guaido attempting to scale a fence outside of parliament. Guaido and his supporters were turned away from the parliament by armed forces and went elsewhere, where they re-elected him as head of Congress. The lack of support from the Venezuelan people for Guaido on Sunday has veteran journalist Earl Bousquet questioning the next steps for the Lima Group. The Lima Group comprises of 12 countries, including St. Lucia, that recognize Guaido as the legitimate president of Venezuela.
One would hope that now that St. Lucia is no longer in the chair at CARICOM, that it will not revert to the process of engaging in a wait-and-see game that leaves the future of our relationship with Venezuela hanging in a balance, while the person who we support has shown clearly that there is no profit for St. Lucia, and I'm not talking about money here, but no benefit in continuing to support Juan Guaido when Venezuelans are turning their backs on him. So that is a crucial issue that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will have to take into consideration here.
Meanwhile, in Parliament on Sunday, a new head of Congress was named in the person of Luis Parra. Bousquet says the hundreds of thousands that once supported Guaido have gone to the wayside amidst allegations of corruption on his part.
Guaido has become very unpopular in Venezuela itself because, number one, he has failed to be able to maintain the level of demonstrations he used to have in the beginning, and secondly, the legislators in the National Assembly who supported him have recognized that he has proceeded to become a billionaire in less than a year, while they are the ones facing the bricks and mortar in the parliament. So they have moved to replace him. He is accusing the fellow who replaced him of being a thief. The fellow who replaced him is accusing him of being a bigger thief.
The Lima Group Regional Bloc on Monday says that it backs the re-election of opposition leader Juan Guaido as head of Venezuela's Congress, after the government of Nicolas Maduro forced a separate vote imposing a new leader of the legislative body. The group says the re-election of Guaido represents a rejection of the reckless actions by Nicolas Maduro's regime that sought to prevent his appointment, which was set up to find a way out of the Venezuelan crisis. The Lima Group statement was signed by Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, and Bolivia. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Solange Alfred.
You're watching the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. Stay with us. There's more coming up after the break.